Hello, we're back again. And this time we're talking about one of my favorite subjects, which is fraud. Piyush, we spent a long time talking about fraud.
I used to, and then it's sort of the topic itself became quite a it became like a weird circle because I remember the days, good old days, Adam, when CTR used to be 3%, 4%, 5%, and we used to say anything above 10% is a fraud, and now we are in a world where it's 99% CTR and we don't even know what reality is anymore. So yeah, good to be back on such a sad note. Happy to sort of invite. Yeah, sorry.
Wow, bring the mood down, why not?
That's one way. You said one of your favorite topics is fraud. That's an oxymoron in itself. But
I mean,
anyway,
you said to me just before this, right? You said to me, like, what is the state of fraud right now? Because, like, I've not heard much about it over the past little while. So, and I think my reaction was, completed it.
yeah, no,
But
for sure. And I'm very interested in seeing this because honestly, I feel, and I don't know, Yael, would you agree or not? But the topic has sort of gone cold for a while. I'm really happy to see this topic come back in and sort of understand what exactly is going on in this space.
Well, I was going to say that's why we have brought AppsFlyer's fraud expert into the fold here so that we can have a nice conversation about the State of Fraud for Marketers report that AppsFlyer's just released recently. Yael, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, and nice to see you again. So, my name is Yael Altshul, and I'm the director of Protect 360, which is basically the fraud prevention and detection product at AppsFlyer. And I've been in the industry for the last 8.5 years in different products. And Protect and fraud in general is one of the most interesting parts I've been dealing in the last years.
I'd agree with that. It's fun, isn't it? Like, I mean, it's you're looking at grey areas. You're looking at things that people can do that are, potential exploits, that kind of thing of the system as it is. I don't know. I've always found it really exciting. So,
It's like a
um,
hide and seek game, but in
yeah,
reality. So
yeah. It's the kind of thing you want to go and hire a load of fraudsters who are doing very good stuff at the moment and bring them in to sort of to be
Hire a load
able
of
to find
fraudsters.
the things that work.
Did you hear yourself? Hire a load of fraudsters.
I mean,
Um,
you don't need today to hire a lot of fraudsters. You just need to have a really good AI tool. So
we'll get into
and
that.
I
We'll,
also want
we'll
to
get
get into
into
that.
that.
Yeah, yeah, really. But anyway, we can start,
Anyway,
Adam.
let's take a look at the headlines that we found or that you guys have found with this. Um, so, 52% of all fraud flows through organic, making it the largest single fraud channel. Now, there's always been a massive thing of it's organic. I don't care. Like, I'm not paying for that. But that's you're we had this conversation before, and you're now telling me that I should care about this. Why?
I think that before we will even drill into the metrics here, I think that the headline for this year report is that in general, fraud didn't just simply rise or fall; it basically moved. And the question is where it moved and why it moved. And organic is really one interesting point here because in the past, people tend to think that they should not care about organic fraud. First of all, they are not paying for that, right?
Yeah.
And second of all is that it was look kind of safe era because it was under supervised, and the 52% is quite a big number. And if there is fraud somewhere, that means that there is an incentive, right? Um,
Well, I
and
mean,
the
there's always been an incentive as the user acquisition budgets growed over time, or grew over time. Growed is a bit of a bad terminology, but as they grew over time, they taking a percentage of that, however small that percentage is a lot of money.
it's a lot of money, and sometimes when you're looking at the fraud rate, sometimes it looks flat, but either way, when the growth of the company become bigger, so those flat percentage really represent more and more budget waste, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And organic fraud, the issue about that is that paid fraud really hurts your channel, but organic fraud hurts your internal truth of your measurement, and it basically pollutes the entire baseline for everything, for measurement, for optimization, for optimizing the next bid. Um, so organic in the past looked like something that should not be considered, but today it is one of the most important things that you should look at.
But are we saying that fraudsters are actually that strategic in the approach to it, that they're going to muddy the waters on purpose of the organic traffic to make the campaigns that they're going to send fraud through in the future to look better?
I will give you one example. Fraudsters, for example, using organic in order to wash new devices because it's less supervised. So if you will see a paid campaign that all of the devices are new, so you will suspect, right? But if during the time before they will enter more and more new devices through organic, basically they will wash that and you will not notice later on that fraud is being performed in the non-organic path.
So MMPs would then have already seen that device and know that it's a real or potentially a real device because it has organic installs associated with. Wow, that's cool. Sorry, Piyush.
And no, I was just asking, what's from an advertiser perspective, what's the revenue impact that you can assess with it? Because look, I understand one part of it, which is if organics are obviously inflated, then obviously you tend to spend more budget on the UA side to sort of, reach to a particular number. Your retention rates are actually lower than what it ideally should be because there's fraud, related with organics and stuff like that. But where exactly is the revenue side of it? What are the fraudsters benefiting? How are they benefiting from this?
So they are using organic fraud in order later on to get paid from the non-organic path. So they are like building the strategy through it. It can be the new devices. It can be playing and tricking the CVR rates and everything around that. And sometimes it's just unattributed fraud, which means that they try to get attribution. But for example, the click was too far from the lookback window. So they
and it just hasn't worked.
Yeah, it just didn't work. But it's a long-term strategy. Fraud is not that simple like in the past, where you were looking just in this point, how can I get the money in? It's a long-term strategy, and organic fraud is part of this strategy.
Got it. Okay.
It's nuts to view it as like a strategic approach rather than just a hack and grab kind of thing. That's really interesting. Hadn't thought of it that way, especially washing the devices. That's nuts. Okay, let's jump on to the next one. Gambling fraud on Android hit 59%. It's the only vertical that's still accelerating, and presumably that's down to some of the ad sources that they're working with.
Basically, when looking at why there is fraud, we can look at different dimensions. We can look at their media mix, if they are working with non-direct, with affiliation, and so on. We can look at the cost model. We can look at the payout, and we can look at the incentive. So all of those dimensions and some more really affect how much fraud you will have. And gambling is the clearest example because the incentive is high. We are talking about real money, high payout, media mix that also involve, non-direct media sources. So this is a clear example where you have high incentives, so you will have more fraud.
So yeah, just do you remember any of an example at the top of your head, like without naming the advertiser in this case, that you actually saw when you informed the advertisers they were actually able to do something about it? Block that media source or something like that?
So this is a really good question because
he's trying to get the money back already.
I will later on tell you how to do that. But generally speaking, it's easy to say, okay, just don't work with those affiliate, work just direct, work just with SRS, and you will be free of fraud, right? But in the end, marketers want to grow and they will expand their media mix. And sometimes there are regulations, right? So it's not a matter of if to work with them or not, is how to work with them. When you're working with non-direct traffic, when you're going to more riskiest place, you need to have more enforcement. You need to create more transparency. And you can also have a lot of best practices. For example, one of them is to create kind of enforcement contract between you and the non-direct, sources that you are working with, and to monitor their performance and to enforce it if they are going beyond, the guidelines that you gave them. So it's not just to block and block and block. Is how to work strategically with them in order to build a good growth strategy.
Got it. And there was one interesting bit that you've mentioned over here in the report itself, which is real users lift hit 175% in Q4. For every real user acquired, advertisers paid for nearly 2 fake ones.
Yeah.
Again, I'm assuming it's down to the vertical, right? It's in the gambling space.
Yes.
Yeah, I really, really like the real user lift. Actually, I was the one that added it to the report, so this is why I like it. But I think that first of all, what I like about real user lift is that this is a metric that look not just about the issue of fraud as a traffic issue. It's look at it as a business perspective pain, because in the end, if for one user, real user, you are paying for 2 fake ones, it's not just about the money that you actually just spent on those fake ones. It's also about the money that you did not spend in bringing 2 other real ones. So it's also hurting your growth. And the numbers are being changed from vertical to vertical, and also in the end by a customer to customer, right? By marketeer to marketeer, because it really depends on your strategy and your enforcement and the media mix, etc. But in the end, it's a metric that show you how much data pollution you have and how much growth you are missing by this fraud, right?
But yeah, what can they do? Because at the end of the day, if you look at
This is what I was just going to ask. Like, what?
yeah, because
When you're actually looking at it, what can you like? How can you stop it? How can you do something different? If like this, you're in gambling, right? And say you're not the biggest gambling site, you're a smaller gambling site, so you don't have the negotiating power with some of the affiliates, you know, when you're saying that to draw up this contract, and you're kind of you're there's an element of being stuck there. Like you're kind of you have to use affiliates because you're unable to do advertising straight through Google, Facebook, you know, whatever it may be. So you have to push through the affiliates. Now, what can somebody like? Is there anything that you can think of that somebody could actually do in that position?
Yeah, so if you cannot just enforce it, you for sure can monitor it, and you for sure can take it under account when talking about your business strategy. You should embed both real time and post attribution detection in your reports in order to clean the baseline, to clean the data, and to see where to invest next. And also, just without enforcement, you can also set, for example, in AppsFlyer, you have different validation rules and things that you can put. And it's not about enforcement. You actually can add more blocking based on different criteria that you have, right? So the first thing is, and it sounds a little bit obvious, like monitor and measure it, but a lot of people don't do it, right? They are just thinking that prevention and detection is one plugin that you just activate, and then you can go and continue with your measurement and your marketing. But it should be part of your strategy. You should look at the data. You should monitor it. You should decide to invest in different aspect or with different strategy based on the data, and to clean the fake one in order to see what real data and how real performance really look like.
What's actually working?
Yes.
and yeah, sorry, just another question, because I do want to get into the methodology side of it, because I'm very much interested in that. When you're saying it's gambling fraud on Android hit 59%, like, because fraud detection over the period of time has sort of improved, right? Obviously, because fraudsters have also sort of started innovating and stuff like that. Used to be CTIT was the biggest sort of metric at one point. Then it all became about CVR, CTR, and those metrics, and how exactly was the time to sort of actually acquire. And then it became more post-install metrics. The people started sort of doing frauds on the post-install metrics on revenue side and stuff like that. And there was a fraud on Google Play. You keep on sort of reimbursing your credits and stuff like that. So a lot of things have sort of evolved. Now in 2026, according to you, how are you measuring it? How are you saying that it's a fraud and it's a non-fraud? Just explain to the viewers at a very basic level, let's say.
Do you mean like how do we measure what fraud is and what fraud is
Yeah,
not?
yeah. What criterias are there?
Because it gets more. it gets more and more grey area, doesn't it? I mean, realistically, you kind of get, what is and what isn't sort of gets closer and closer together and sometimes overlaps. So that's an
Yeah.
interesting question. Yeah.
I will not say gray area. I will say it become harder and harder to detect which user is a real user and which user is a fake one. And I will give an example. Like you were talking about the CTAT, for example. So in the past, when you were looking at the histogram of a real CTAT and a fake CTAT, it was super clear what is fraud traffic and what is valid traffic. And today, when you are looking at those histograms of both fake and real traffic, valid traffic, you see that they are identical. So the detection mechanism now need to be much smarter. You need to fight high tech with high tech, right? And this is why, for example, we released our AI layer, which does not just look at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different parameters. It looks on dozens of parameters at the same time, something that a single person cannot do, and check the correlation and the anomaly around all of those parameters at once. And if for you and for me it's hard to see a difference, so for the fraudsters it's harder to perform fraud that way, right? So it's much harder to bypass, but on the other hand it's also much more accurate because it can see really small changes across multiple factors, right? And the second thing is that fraud detection also is shifting from install fraud to more in-depth in-app and session based fraud. So we are not just looking at the install level, we are also looking what is happening later on. Because fraudsters are not just doing fake installs, they are faking the in-apps and the session and the purchases and everything around that. If in the past a client came to me and said, "Why did you block that? I see in-app events from this."
They're paying users.
Yeah. So today we are saying the fact that there are in-app events and even deposits does not mean it's not a fake user, and it's crazy game.
So that's a very interesting point because I've spoken with a lot of people, especially on the product side, and we try and explain to them, why I understand the rationale why they're doing it, but it's good for everybody to understand why is there a fake user doing a fake purchase and actually generating revenue for the company.
Because sometimes it's worth it because the campaign is CPA campaign, right? And the payout really worth the deposit. And sometimes they are doing that in order, again, like the new devices, to mask other fake activity from the same source, from the same site. So it's, again, like I said, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. They are doing a long-term strategy in order to gain revenue, to gain incentive. And those are just two out of many examples of why they are doing that.
So basically what you're saying is they're trying to mimic the behavior of a real user in order to sustain for a long-term fraudulent behavior across multiple sort of
yeah
areas.
or just to get
100%.
the CPA, or just to get the CPA payout, which
Just
can
to
be
boost it a bit, yeah.
which can be higher than the deposit, because you don't know what you don't know about the deposit itself.
Yeah, makes sense.
And then also, I suppose, with these these people have shown themselves to be incredibly clever anyway. So when you're looking at the amount of money that you're getting in as a fraudster compared to what you would need to pay out to make that traffic look real, it's obviously still very beneficial. So it's kind of, we'll give one for you, one for me, one for you, one for me.
Yeah, you would know, Adam.
It's all in the past now. It's all in the past, Piyush.
I'm just saying, you have some experience there. No, I'm just kidding. I do want to move to third topic, but yeah, I do want to pick your brain. I mean, let's move to the third topic, and then we'll talk about the AI part of it.
Okay, let's jump into the third key finding. So store validation accounted for up to 73% of all iOS fraud in 2025. So this is store validation on purchases?
So there is store validation on purchases, which is what people are usually thinking of. But there is also a store validation about the install itself. Basically, stores like iOS or Google Play, they sign, they install with a receipt, basically.
Okay.
And it's something that is very interesting because not because it's just another fraud method, but it shows how fraud really adapts to platform mechanisms. Um, Stores like iOS and Android and Google, they created this mechanism in order to avoid fraud. And what fraudsters are doing, they are using this mechanism in order to perform more
Show
fraud.
that it's not fraud.
Yes, and they are manipulate the receipt. They are using it in a lot of ways I will not explain, but
Probably best not to.
but later on, this in the end, it's really interesting, and someone can say fun game where you are creating mechanism to avoid fraud. Fraudsters are using those mechanisms in order to create more fraud.
Yeah. Yeah.
So store validation is one of that.
And is this so? Without telling us how they do it, is this some kind of loophole within the mechanisms that have been created by the stores, or like how? I'm just trying to understand like how it's being abused, if it and who needs to fix it.
Like our detection, also the iOS store validation, for example, is being updated all the time, and we are on top of that. And we are always monitoring it and finding new ways for fraudsters to abuse it. It's not, I will just say, it's not that simple of, okay, let's just sign it differently. They're using the way other MMPs or clients are using the receipt in order to validate it's a real install in order to abuse it and claim for this install.
Okay.
But Yael, in this case, accountability lies with Apple, no, in this case, because all the transactions are happening through their
Well,
platform.
not for Google.
I mean, I'm talking about iOS because it's 73%. It's pretty high, but yeah.
This percent is the percent is being related to the platform. In Android, you have a lot of different ways to manipulate the install or the in-app. So the fraud types are very different. And in iOS, because it's more privacy-centric one and more closed system, so the ways to manipulate it are different. And so fraudsters are going, and most of the fraud there is for the store validation because this is how they can enter. It's not that the Google Play store validation is much better than the iOS. It's just that fraud can be spread in different ways. And in iOS, there are less ways to perform fraud. This is why this number is high. It's just the
But
size
is it,
itself.
sorry, one more follow up there. Is it because of the fact, because look, when I'm looking at SKR network data, right, I'm assuming it's at a user level because obviously it's at an Apple ID level. So it's not a device specific mechanism when I'm looking at, SKR network data. So is that true to say that SKR network organic numbers would be somewhat close to truth, organic and non-organic, or you think there's some fraud happening there as well?
We cannot really validate scan data, so I cannot
It's a
say.
closed
Yeah,
box,
it's a
isn't it?
closed system, and I was the product of Scan before, and we try to really assess, the performance there, and it's something that is not deterministic because it's a closed system, so you cannot really verify it. You don't have the labels, you don't have the real data, you just have the end result, right?
Yeah.
So it's an interesting point, but we cannot really say.
Understood. And sorry, one more follow-up before Adam takes over the entire screen. Just, just if I'm a user and I'm using VPN to go to another country and buy cheaper sort of packages, would you classify this as a fraud? Because it's the real user behavior, but it's a fraudulent mechanism.
I can say this is one out of many signals we are using in order to see if there is a fraudulent behavior.
Got it.
Okay, next one. Social media on iOS hit 275% real user lift, 3 in 4 installs were fake for a full quarter. Whoa. Is that true? I mean, it must be. It's printed.
Yes.
Sure.
That's
Whatever
on the
printed is
internet. It
actually
must be true.
Yeah.
You got to tell us more here. Like, how can we understand this?
The
I
real
really
user,
thought Elon Musk fixed it on X, no? Sorry.
no, the real user lift is a simple metric. It's just how many, fake activity you have compared to the real activity. So it's based on the detection. It's really a easy metric to calculate, right? How much fake I have and how much real traffic I have. And this is the proportion. So when the proportion is that, it means that you have almost 3 fake users on every one real user. And this represents the amount of fake detection that we were able to detect there. And again, it's the same conversation like the gambling. It's all about the incentive. So if the incentive is high, fraud will be there. And also if the enforcement is not that good, so it will be easier for fraudsters to slip in and get their money.
All right, I'm gonna come across really stupid here, but how do you make money as a fraudster when it's going through social media sources and social media are charging for that install? I don't get a percentage of that. So how do I make money there?
I'm a celebrity, assume that for 1 second. And then I'm going out and I'm deploying an agency, yeah? And I'm saying I need my followers to increase from 300K to 1 million,
Yeah.
as an example, right? Now that agency is going to get paid for that 700K increase, like, I don't know, $1 million, just take an example.
Yeah.
Now that agency was going to get paid $1 million. This guy is not saying that I need all the real ones or the fake ones. You don't know, right? But they are going to get $1 million for that increase. So they will go into the market, multiple affiliate partners are there, and they will all sort of create a lot of fake accounts, right, on those social media, so on TikTok and X and on Instagram and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then they all make money in the process because they are all, like, let's say 60%, 50%, according to this report, 75% of them are fraudsters, and they are wrong accounts. They're not the correct account, but they are making money through the process, right?
Got it. That makes more sense. Okay. Yep.
Took you some time.
Sold. I'm just gonna go start my
Don't
agency.
fun with you. I need to talk with you a little bit more.
Who?
We can have a weekly call like that.
Yeah. I think we need one. Especially when I've started my agency. Right. Let's go on. Oh, this is a good one. Because this kind of leads us into the AI element as well. So, spoofing is the fastest rising fraud technique in 2025, and it fabricates everything from scratch. So, there is no real install, right?
There is not a real launch at all.
That's got to be the best. I mean, from a fraud perspective, that's got to be what you're aiming for. Don't need to bother with all these device banks and everything else.
No, I do want to understand this a bit more. There is no app launch at all, and yet it's an install.
Yes.
Because you're firing.
I'm not going to ask how. Yael is going to say again, it's a topic for offline. But I can
go into this because I have no idea in reality. So you're blindly firing at all of the endpoints. Like when you take a game apart, you can see all of the endpoints that it fires out to. You can see all of the endpoints that the MMP fires out to, all of that sort of stuff. You can then pretend to make those calls and keep pretending until you actually get them that stick. Because obviously that's when you trace it back and you look at some of the organic, that's what the organic was attempting to do in the first place. And then they've failed. So they've gone through as organic because they haven't qualified as a paid install. So it's effectively you're doing all of the bits behind the scenes without actually having the device and installing the game on it.
Yeah, and this is why spoofing is cheap to do, right?
Massively.
You don't need to have device farm. You don't need to pay anyone or to activate any bots, right? And the scary fraud it's not the fraud that looks bad, it's the fraud that looks very invisible. And spoofing is one of those things, right?
When you write a book any day, Yale, that should be the tagline. Anyway,
It's not the fraud that looks bad, it's the fraud that looks invisible.
it looks invisible. Loved it.
It's really good example of how fraud adjusts to changes. So from one hand, companies become more advanced, more savvy. They monitor the traffic, they look at it, they have more enforcement, right? And so we are blocking it everywhere. And on the other hand, it's not enough anymore to do just install fraud. User must look legit also after the install. So you need to have mechanism that is able to fake not just the click, not just the install, also the sessions, also the in-apps, right? You have to have the entire mechanism. And that's what is pushing fraudsters to do fraud like spoofing. Okay. And in the spoofing part, there is no install. They're just mimicking the launch, making clients, MMP, or any other provider think that there was a launch without any install from the store or out of store, no matter what. And basically, they're faking the entire pipe from the beginning to the end.
It's beautiful.
Wow.
I mean,
Beautiful.
looking at it objectively.
Beautiful is probably the wrong word, Adam.
Yeah.
But so yeah, again, I just as a I know it will be very difficult for you to explain without giving the details, but I am fascinated to understand how are you able to detect this, especially in the AI world, because if this can be done at scale, then you're talking about a very different scale of fraud, right? Because I'm assuming a lot of this can be automated in the future.
Yeah, the scale is crazy. When there are clients that we see there is a spoofing issue, usually those are clients that are working with affiliates, non-direct traffic in a risky places with high payout. So there is an incentive there. And when we are able to detect this spoofing part, it's crazy. We can talk about 50, 60, 70% of the entire traffic. It's crazy. And we have different solutions for that. For example, we have the a security plugin from our side that is able to basically sign the different calls that are arriving to our platform. And that way we are able, to make sure that those, it's like the receipt.
So you're essentially putting a secret onto each call that AppsFlyer knows is coming, but everyone else, like, you wouldn't know to put it on there in the first place.
Yeah, and again, it's always evolving. So it's not just, plug and play. So they will find a way to manipulate it, and we will find a way, to adjust and fix it and close the hole. So it's an endless game. It's the endless game in spoofing and an endless game in fraud in general, right?
That's an interesting one. That's scary. Well, this is, I mean, this is what I was saying about how it jumps over to AI, and this is where the conversation goes now in terms of, like, I'm really interested to know if you're starting to have to combat AI fraud, and, like, how you can possibly tell that it isn't real users, because the whole, it's essentially thinking for itself and behaving like a real user would. Is that something you've already started on?
We started 2 years ago, actually.
Amazing. So it's done then.
Yeah, we've done that, and it's always being improved. And by the way, I think it's about 30% of the total detection is coming from the AI layer. Might be more or less, but in the end, you need to fight high tech with high tech, and we are fighting AI with AI.
One of the last questions I have really is about what I could do, or what your advice would be for us to do. If I'm a smaller game, I've not really started thinking about fraud. I didn't realize it was so much of a thing. What do I do?
So I think that if there is one thing that marketeers should take from this conversation, is that fraud is not just one-time cleanup exercise, right? It's an ongoing growth strategy. You should audit your organic. You should monitor high risk channels more aggressively as you scale. And remember that when you close one hole, so fraud will just look on the next one. And the goal is not to avoid risk entirely. The goal is to grow with the right visibility, the right control, and the confidence that your growth is actually a real growth. Submit
Uh,
Thank you so much for joining us. We'll leave it there, but thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute treasure, and I can't wait to do this again. We're going to have to do this on a regular basis.